Hi everybody. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these coffee filter doodle girls. And guess what? It requires a minimum of drawing skills because maybe like you, I don't have confidence in my drawing skills. So I look for workarounds, and this is one of them. So these doodle girls come from a blog, The Maker Beehive, and I like them. And I thought, oh, I could use this in my art. But then I thought, I can do something else. I can change this or use this as a jump start. So I blew them up to a size that's going to fit my 9 by 12 Canson Mixed Media art journal page. And then I'm going to grab some coffee filter collage papers. Now I had some on my table and that's where I got the idea. Then I grabbed all different colors. I went through each of my folders and I realized that I could use this with a few folds or a few cuts and make skirts or dresses for these girls. And that's where the idea came from. So I'm just going to jump right in and I'm just going to cut off the heads because that's the only part that I'm going to use. Now, I don't know how I'm going to accomplish everything. I don't know what roadblocks I'm going to come into, but I'm going to figure it out as I go. I've picked, basically the primary colors here, the colors that are going to show up, and then I'm going to cut a cone shape of the coffee filter, making use of that rounded edge. Now, coffee filters are great collage papers, and these I've colored and designed, and I will link that video because you're going to want to add these to your stash because you can use them for all sorts of collage papers, not just what you're seeing me doing here. So I'm just cutting a basic cone shape for each of the girls. You can play with the sizes here, and I think that would add even more interest to your page. Now, as I go, I am going to learn how to do this page. By the time I'm done, I should know how to do it, and I'm going to figure out things, solving the problems as you go. And you have to be willing to do that when you're trying something new. So I'm just going to cut this off because I want to keep the neck. Then I thought with the one skirt, I'm going to layer it, give it kind of a ruffled edge, kind of a two-tone. So I go in my stash, grab a teal or aqua one, and then I'm going to layer this one up, cutting the tops off, the little triangles there. There is no right or wrong. You could omit the neck altogether, and if that's the look you like, that's what you go for. So I'm playing with the orientation. And again, I'm figuring it out. Now, this page took almost 2 hours to do because I was figuring it out as I went. Now, the coffee filters go slightly translucent. They look like stained glass. They're very vibrant. But because I plan on using a dark background here, I didn't want that dark background to dull or distort the colors. So I'm flipping these coffee filters over and giving them a coat of white gesso. I'm trying to be very careful here not to get any of that white gesso on the front, which of course I do. But you can easily wipe that off with a baby wipe. And I'm going to show that in a bit. So I'm just putting a coat of white gesso on here. Now it does kind of seep through a little bit, so we're going to have to adjust for that. Like I said, there are problems along the way, and I come up with a solution. Here I'm wiping and keeping my work surface a little bit cleaner so I don't transfer it to the front. Now I'm going to give that a good dry before I move on to the next step. So I did some of that gesso seep through the front, but I just took a baby wipe like you see me here and I wiped that off once it was dry. And most of it did come out. It dulled it a little bit, so I'm going to give this a wash and you're going to see me doing that. At this point I decide that I don't want the neck from the printable. So I'm cutting that off. Instead, I'm just going to draw my own neck on there. I think I can draw a neck. It's just two straight lines, right? Here I'm just doing a scalloped edge on the skirt. Now you could add and embellish these skirts however you want. And if you don't have coffee filters, although I really encourage you to build your stash with them, you can use gel prints or scrapbook paper. So I decided by putting on the coffee filters, I decided on this dark purpley pink background. I liked how those colors popped off. So I auditioned several. I pulled out several gel prints and decided. Now, here I'm just gluing that gel print down and I'm using it as kind of a base background. If I was doing this again, I probably would just start from scratch. I would use my gel prints to figure out what color I would want to go with, but then I would just paint it from scratch. So I'm just putting a generous amount of fluid matte medium on here, and then I'm just going to glue this sheet of copy paper, my gel print copy paper, on here. Now you'll notice I have this white border. So I thought about framing that out, painting that a different color, and treating it differently. And then I decided that instead I am going to try to duplicate it and extend the colors out to the edge. So you aren't really going to see where the page ends and the art journal page, the mixed media paper, begins. I took a key card here and I'm just smoothing it out to get some of those air bubbles out and get good adhesion of the gel print. So now I'm taking deep violet, quinacridone magenta. I use also some dioxazine purple. And I'm just trying to match the color that is on that gel print. And I'm even going over top of some of the gel print. So basically creating another background. And I'm just mixing colors. I'm not too worried. This is just the base of our background. Some of what was on that gel print is going to shine through, but I'm going to add more layers. And I'm loving how these are working. So because this dulled down a little bit, what I did is I took some acrylic paint like you see me doing here with a wet makeup sponge, and I'm just putting a wash of color just to brighten it up. And I did that with all three of the skirts, the coffee filter skirts. Just to increase the vibrancy because my background is so dark. Now, this pink skirt is getting lost with the background. It's too much the same. So I'm going to add some white details. This is a piece of shelf liner, just putting white acrylic paint on it, and I'm just using that as a stamp to lighten this so there's a little bit more variation between it and the background. So anything that you use, any gel print, any scrapbook paper, you can always tweak it and make it work if it's not the perfect go together. So now I want to add a little bit more to my background. Well, I have some white paint on here, so I thought, let's put some of this into the background. I'm careful to put where the one page, the gel print page ended, I'm going over that edge to camouflage it. This stencil is called knitted stitching. Crafter's Workshop. I love it. I'm using Prussian blue here. It's a dark color, and I'm going over top of where I already just stamped with the white. I just want to build some interest. I don't want to go too terribly contrasty, although in a minute I'm going to add because I really wanted to make this lighter. Again, I'm auditioning these out. How does it look? What do I need to do, if anything? I grabbed this. This is a sink liner that I've cut to size. I'm putting on white acrylic paint and using it as a stamp. It is the greatest stamp going. I love the detail that's on here. This is adding some contrast. It's adding something that's a little larger scale. And because it's white, it's brightening up that background just that little bit. And I just thought it was too dark. I'm not looking for perfect stamping, just want something interesting in my background. Now, I had that teal aqua, and I wanted to bring that into the background as well as the gold. So I'm putting some of that bright aqua on that stamp, and I'm just putting this in a few places. I just want everything to work cohesively together. So what's in my focal image, I want a little bit of that color in the background, but I'm trying hard not to get too carried away here. And then because I want some of that yellow in there, I am splattering with gold. So I'm adding bling and it reads yellow. So it ties the background into that yellow skirt. Once this is all done, I'm going to make sure that this is completely dry. Now I'm ready to glue my bodies down. Using fluid matte medium, I'm gluing the head, and then I'm going to glue the skirt, my coffee filter dresses. And I'm noticing that it's really working. The adding that coat of gesso underneath really worked well. So I'm just going to glue all three girls down. And I know at this stage that I'm going to do some shading, I'm going to do some painting, I'm going to add those details, and it's those details that are really going to make this pop. Now here I'm noticing that the girl on the left and the girl on the right, I said both of those, the head and the body, there's a bit of a size scale problem. I really like the yellow dress girl. That seems to be the right fit, but that's something I can remember for next time. When you're doing that trial page, write it down. Remind yourself, okay, if I'm doing this again, I can change the size of the dress to match the head or, you know, pay attention to this. So here I'm taking white gesso and I'm painting over the faces because I'm going to make this a skin tone. And I'm adding the neck in there, kind of a necks and shoulders. Here I'm taking my Stabilo all pencil and I'm drawing just legs. Now this is a doodle girl. And when I looked at the one from the Maker Beehive, so perfect. So I'm just drawing shoes on here. I'm drawing the legs. And every time I do this, I'm going to get better and get better ideas of how to do it, how to add and change it up. From the thickness of the legs to the size of the shoes to which way the shoes are pointing, I can play around with that. And don't be afraid to go on Pinterest to look at what other people have done and get ideas for how to put the legs or the arms. So here I'm just putting a coat of gesso that's blacking out or whiting out what's in the background, and it's going to allow me to put whatever color I want on top. I want this to look rustic. I want it to look doodly, imperfect. We're not going for realism. Here's a tip. Use burnt sienna with white gesso to make a wide variety of flesh tones. Add a little bit more of the burnt sienna, it's a darker flesh tone. Add a little more white, you're going to have a lighter flesh tone. So that's going to enable me to have a different flesh tone for each of the girls if that's what I want. I'm mixing it on my brush, wet on wet, a little bit of gesso, a little bit of the burnt sienna. And as you can see, we've got some variation in that skin tone, and that I like. So I'm just going to paint the legs here, the faces, the neck, and eventually the arms when I draw them on. I was a little bit leery about doing the arms. It was a little more scary than the sticks for the legs. So you do what you're comfortable with first and then try something. And remember, the first time you do something, it's highly unlikely that it's going to be perfect. Give yourself the chance to learn. So here I'm just adding the arms, and I've decided to just go with round or oval hands instead of trying to figure out fingers or a thumb. I'm just making this super, super simple. I do plan on doing more of these, playing with this idea. Instead of the doodle heads here, you could use heads from a magazine. Now, I'm looking at these doodle heads and I'm going, there's nothing so difficult on these heads. Surely I could draw this myself. And if I'm looking at hers, maybe I spend some time sketching out and making these faces on my own. It's all a process, and you don't get better at something unless you do it. Now I'm using the hair and I decide I want a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead. So I'm just grabbing my acrylic paint. I wanted to make sure I had some of that yellow in there that ties in with the yellow skirt. This one's going to be just pretty much straight burnt sienna for that reddish auburn color. Now there is a coat of matte medium on there, and that has sealed the paper and allows me to easily paint on top. I decide to venture forth and give this girl little pigtails. So I just add some gesso and give her little pigtails on here. And look at me. I've added to the hairstyle. You can go onto Pinterest and Google hairstyles and then, draw your oval shape or round shape for the face and practice the different hairstyles. All you need to draw here is the face and the head. I think this is burnt umber that I'm using with a little bit of black. And now I'm using my angle brush and I am shading. And here, where the skin tone is, I am shading with the burnt umber, I think. It's brown. I can't remember which brown I grabbed here. I'm just adding that little bit of shading here with the burnt umber. On the arms, the legs, the face, the hair. I will link the video where I teach how to shade, how to use your brush. Where I'm adding the shading and the highlight, I just do what looks good. I follow my intuition and I do what looks good. It's not studied or taught, so I might be wrong. Just shading around the hairline, but you can tell that the shading makes a difference. I think I'd like to do this one again, but with a lighter background. I think maybe my background was a little dark here, but this is me not beating myself up that I did a horrible job because I don't think that. This is me evaluating what I've done and saying, okay, what do I like? What worked well? What do I need to do next time to maybe improve it or change it up? So here I'm taking black acrylic paint and I'm going on the outside of the skirts and the girls. This is making the girls pop out from the background. It's adding that shadow in there and it's just making it stand out a little bit more. And then I'm shading on top of the dress with the black. And between those two, I've really made the girls, my doodle girls, my coffee filter doodle girls, stand out. Now I realize this girl's dress, the pink dress, I kind of made a mistake with the neckline. It looks like her dress is actually falling off. I'm going to solve that problem in a bit. Like I said, as you go through a page, it's all about coming up with a solution to solve what's happening, fix what's happening, make it work. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means you got a problem to solve. So here's that dress, and I think this is where I decide to put some straps on her dress. And I'm just using some quinacridone magenta and just basically making some straps to make this work. There we go. Kind of like a halter top. But again, those are some things that you could vary the necklines. Here I've grabbed my Inktense pencil and I'm adding some rosy cheeks to my girls. I do activate this and let it dry, but I think that footage was lost. I'm just putting circles on. Now you could do this with acrylic paint or your pit markers. I like using my Inktense pencils because, well, I have them. And then I decided, since I had that one, what would happen if I outlined the dress here and activated it? And this gives it a nice rosy color. I really like this effect. So much so that I grab the blue and I do it for the other two dresses too to make it stand out. There's my Inktense pencils. I have the pencils and the blocks, and they are ink. They work like watercolor, but they are ink, and therefore they're permanent when they're dry. So here I'm just adding blue. That's just adding an interesting way of shading it. A little different. So you could just do it with the Inktense blocks or pencils instead of doing with the black. Here I've done the black and the blue and the black and the red in the middle girl. And I like that two-tone effect. I'm taking my stylus and black acrylic paint and giving my girls some eyes, some dot eyes. And again, you can play with differences here. I didn't do a whole lot of experimentation here, but you can make them oval, you can make them bigger, you can make them smaller. And so make the face of everyone. Just adding a little line for a mouth and some, I don't know, they just look like they needed eyebrows. I grab my black Posca pen and I am making sketchy lines all around the girls. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm not giving a solid line. I want this to be a doodle girl. Doodle meaning you have permission to not be perfect. Here I try to start coloring them in with the Posca marker. I end up grabbing a black with my brush and painting it in. It's so much faster than coloring. Sketchy black lines in the hair, on the dress. All the while trying to evaluate it and see what I would do different next time, what I'm going to try. What other possibilities are there? Grab my white fine liner, and I'm just going to go dash dash all the way around the skirts of the girls. I always like adding this little bit of detail. It seems to always go well when I use collage paper in this way. One more thing, one more detail that makes it stand out. Give a little whites to the eyes of my girls. So you can go and create your own coffee filter doodle girls, following the steps that I've done here and improving on what I've done. If you come up with any great ideas, be sure to let me know. One more thing to do, we need to add a sentiment. Not necessary. I'm using sentiments from my Joy sentiment pack. Joy was my word of the year. And I'm just going to pick 2 phrase sentiments for each of the girls and glue that on with my fluid matte medium. The Joy Sentiment Pack, as all my sentiment packs, are digital downloads. They're available for purchase at NINNYSNAPKINS.com. I will link that in the description box if you want to go and check out the various themed sentiment packs. Just going to do a little sketchy black lines around the sentiments just to set them off. And there we have the finished page. I learned a lot, and I will be doing some things differently. Here's a tag I made using the same process, using what I learned, moving forward. And I grabbed the printable and I put the skirts or the coffee filters on them. I'll definitely be playing with this more and perfecting it over time. Until next time, go get creative.